John Hodge has been gracious enough to join us from 3 Down. I appreciate it, John, if we can bring him in from Winnipeg. The fans, the viewers have been asking to get John on. And let's talk about the CBA. You've been at the forefront of all the news. You've been breaking the news. Here's my question for you first. Who won? Did anybody win in this, do you think, when all's said and done?
I think at the end of the day, the fans won. We're getting football this weekend, Rod. The fans won. To delve a little bit more into it, at the end of the day, I think the players have come away with a lot of concessions that they've lacked in the past, right? They've got health coverage. They've got guaranteed veteran contracts coming in, or at least the option for partially guaranteed veteran contracts. And, of course, they've got the opportunity to get revenue sharing and actually audit some of the CFL's financial statements as of 2024 by a third party. So if I had to pick a winner between the two, I'd say the players came away with more than I expected, but the fans are the biggest winners this weekend.
No doubt, and but I think that the players did come away with more. But tell me if I have not gone into the minutiae of this deal. So some have written in and said this isn't a lot different from the last one, or at the very least, this isn't much different than the one last week they rejected. How big are the differences in this, what they agreed to last night?
Well, the two deals, the tentative agreement from last week that was voted down and the new deal that was ratified late last night are not very different. The biggest difference between the two is the ratification bonus, right? There was no ratification bonus as part of the first deal. And from what I understand, a ratification bonus was not high on the bargaining committee's list of things to negotiate for and advocate for as part of this new deal. And I think ultimately that came down to the fact that a lot of the players, a lot of the membership took a ratification bonus for granted. They thought this money was coming as a default. End of agreement was struck last week. There was no ratification bonus. 30% of the players reportedly did not even vote. And so once they took some money from later on in the deal, right, they've shaved the salary cap down a little bit 5-6 years from now to provide an initial bonus of $1.225 million across the 9 teams, about 400 veteran players. That's about $3,000 a pop. I don't know about you, Rod, but if all I have to do is pull out my phone and take 30 seconds and cast an electronic ballot, $3,000 is a pretty good payday for that 30 seconds of my time. So to me, that's the biggest difference, is the players who are currently voting, many of whom realize, especially if they're already veterans of 5-6 years in this league, they know 5-6 years from now, they're not going to be around to still benefit from a higher salary cap number. They wanted some money in their pockets right now, and it's hard to blame them, frankly, after a shortened 2021 season during which CFL teams did not spend the salary cap, but instead spent to the salary floor.
I couldn't agree more with you. And the thing is, why would the owners not think they should realize the players wouldn't care what's going to happen 7 years from now? And I kind of got a kick out of this, John. The owners said, we're going to buy your vote. I mean, the politicians don't come out and admit it, but they're trying to do the same thing. The owners were at least honest about it. Nelson Hakowicz writes in regarding the ratio. I know this is a contentious issue, and it's confusing to a simpleton like me, John. Nelson says, is lowering the ratio simply paving the way to allow for CFL expansion without causing performance drop-off? Like, ratio, a very contentious issue in this, correct?
It absolutely was. And a lot of the Canadian players who voted against the original deal voted out of concern for the ratio going down. Now, we're still going to get the same number of Canadian starters. We're still going to get the same number of Canadians on the roster. And it should be noted as well, the ratio changes implemented in this new CBA do not come into effect for this season. We are talking about 2023 and beyond. Under the original agreement, they were going to allow up to 3 American veterans, known as either naturalized or nationalized American players, meaning 3 seasons on the same CFL team or 5 in the league total. They were going to be permitted to come in and rotate with Canadian players up to 49% of snaps in a game. And I think that Canadians simply can't compete, or maybe the initial starting 7 can compete, but in the case of injuries, right, in the case of early retirements possibly, and those other mitigating factors, maybe they have too many backups playing in spots when they're not necessarily ready. Now, for me, I always point to the developmental aspect of the ratio. I tweeted today, right? Andrew Harris started off his career coming out of the CJFL. Javon Catoy, same thing, receiver in BC, who I think is going to have a big year. He was a CGFL player. You've got Brad Sinopoli, who changed positions at the CFL level. You've got undrafted players like Lewis Ward, Jerome Messam, who have done great things, and who wouldn't have made it out of their first training camps if there was no ratio to protect them. Now, if expansion is down the road, I know that has been something that's been talked about. If expansion were to come in, would we look at lowering the ratio, even temporarily? I know when Ottawa came into the league in 2014, there was a sense that maybe there wasn't enough Canadian talent to go around. But my counter argument would be, I think this is somewhat of a self-fulfilling prophecy. For instance, let's say, heaven forbid, in one of tonight's preseason games, a Canadian star goes down. The Canadian backup might not be ready to start week one, but by the end of the year, with all those reps, they're going to be in a position to be a full-time starter in 2023. It's that development piece that you're missing if we're just going to have Americans come in to take up those Canadian backup spots. And then 5-6 years from now, I think the fear is, well, if we've developed fewer Canadians, then people are just going to make the same argument. Oh, look around. There's not enough Canadians in backup roles. We got to push the ratio down. Because let's remember, Rod, there used to be 10 Canadian starters in the CFL. They went to 7 many years ago, and I think there is fear that it could go down further. Personally, I'm a strong advocate for the ratio, but I appreciate that there isn't everybody's cup of tea.
I appreciate the explanation on that, and I marvel at your connections within the league, and your insider column at 3 Down is the best thing on the internet as far as I'm concerned. So from what you've gleaned through all of this, John, is the CFL, as we get set to kick off tonight, the first game of the preseason, in good shape, fair shape, not great shape? Because I'm hearing all kinds of things, but I trust your sources more. How do you feel about the state of the CFL post-COVID here, and I hope COVID behind us?
Well, in terms of gameplay, the league has obviously made changes, right? They've moved in the hash marks. They've done other things to try to create more offense. And I do think that we are going to get more offense this season, partly due to the rules, and then also partly due to the fact that players aren't coming off a lost season, right? Expecting players after almost 2 calendar years away from the game to light things up in 2021, I think was too much to ask. 2022, I think we're going to see a better product on the field. Now, even more importantly, off the field, I heard a lot of talk over the last 2 years about how the CFL was dying. The CFL needed to go to 4 downs. The CFL needed to merge with a twice-failed American league known as the XFL. The CFL needed to change everything. Young people don't care. And look, I don't think the CFL is in a position to scream from the hills that they've won, or they have been, at the end of the day, they've reached the peak, because they haven't. There are ways in which the CFL needs to improve from a business standpoint. But the fact that they have revenue sharing across 9 teams, the fact that we now have included players, or at least as of 2024, we'll have included players taking advantage of league revenue, Grey Cup revenue, having the ability to audit CFL books, which have long been a secret in this country, right? To my knowledge, teams have never once opened up the books to players. And if they did, it was before I was even born. So to me, those things are extremely positive. I think the CFL has finally set a solid foundation. They did not get here quickly. They did not get here efficiently. These are changes they should have seen 10 years ago that needed to be made to build long-term success. So as much as it's unfortunate that they wasted time pursuing some things that never came to fruition, or things like, for instance, the Global Initiative that did come to fruition but have yet to bear any fruit, I think they finally have the proper foundation needed. Because let's remember, if the owners were actually in a position where they were getting ready to fold these franchises and walk away, they never in a million years would have given the players some of the concessions that they just did. And they gave those players concessions on a CBA that is minimum 5 years, could be 7 years. But the opt-out does not belong to the league. It belongs to the players. So the players can opt out in 5 years. The reason being, that's when the television broadcasting deal expires and the players could potentially see more money if and when the league is able to get a better deal come 2026. So It's unfortunate it's taken this long, but yes, I am optimistic about the future of the CFL, more optimistic than I've been in years.
We only have a minute, but Bombers home to the Edmonton Elks tonight. What will you be looking for in the game?
I'm looking for quarterbacks, and for two reasons. One, nobody seems to know who's going to start for the Edmonton Elks this season. It could be Taylor Cornelius. It could be Nick Arbuckle. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be Trey Ford. It had been 42 years since we saw a Canadian quarterback get drafted in the first round. He got picked in the first round. Chris Jones raved about him before the draft, and he raves about him all the time now. So I'm interested to see that. On the other side, the Bombers announced this morning Zach Collaros is not going to dress tonight. That means Drew Brown should get a lot of reps, second-year quarterback, as should Dakota Prukop. Dakota's been around with a bunch of CFL teams. He had stints in Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton. He's now 28. This could be his last chance to make his mark. So with Zach Collaros not dressing, I'm really interested to see what these young Winnipeg quarterbacks can do, and I'm really interested to see what Edmonton's quarterbacks can do, because they're bringing all of them, Rod. All the quarterbacks are dressing for Edmonton tonight, and I think they're going to play. So I'm watching the quarterbacks tonight. I think we'll get some questions answered regarding those two clubs.
Should be fun. Enjoy it, John, and tremendous work on the CBA coverage. Thank you on behalf of this fan. I appreciate it. Enjoy the game.
Thanks, Rod. Thanks for having me.
3downnation.com's John Hodge. Hey, everybody. Thanks for watching the RP Show on YouTube. And don't forget, we're live daily on YouTube from noon to 2 Eastern. If you like what you see, hit subscribe. And if you like the program, check around for other segments of the Rod Pedersen Show here on YouTube.